I expected my sister's birthday party to be uncomfortable, but then she smiled at my daughter and told her to go help the servants clean up. The whole room laughed. I didn't. I had just noticed one small detail in that perfect mansion that didn't belong, and it would lead to a paper trail so dirty her friends would run before the cake was even cut. My name is Aurora Bennett. I am 34 years old, and if there is one thing my job at Stonebridge Credit and Lending has taught me, it is that numbers do not lie. But people do. I spend 40 hours a week staring at loan applications, credit scores, and debt-to-income ratios. I know exactly what stability looks like on paper, and I know exactly what desperation looks like when it is wrapped in a fancy suit. My life is not glamorous. I drive a sedan that is 6 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment where the rent is reasonable, and I pay my bills on the second day of every month. It is a quiet life, a safe life, and it is exactly the kind of life my sister, Camille, would describe as suffocating. Do you think Aunt Camille will like it? The question came from the back seat. Pulling my eyes to the rearview mirror, my daughter, Sophie, was clutching a small, haphazardly wrapped package in her lap. She is 10 years old, with eyes that are still too big for the harshness of the world and a heart that refuses to understand the concept of cynicism. She will love it, Soph, I said, forcing a warmth into my voice that I did not quite feel. Because you picked it out, Sophie smiled, looking down at the gift. It was a ceramic jewelry dish she had found at a local craft fair. She had saved her allowance for 5 weeks to buy it. $15. To Sophie, that was a fortune. To the people we were about to see, $15 was what they tipped the valet for not scratching their Porsches. It is the color of her eyes, Sophie said softly, smoothing the wrinkled wrapping paper. I remember she said she liked teal. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. My sister did like teal, but only if it came in a box from Tiffany's or was woven into silk from Italy. Sophie believed that thought and sentiment were the currency of love. She did not know that in my family, or at least the branch my sister was desperately trying to graft herself onto. The only currency that mattered was the kind you could flaunt on Instagram. We turned off the main highway and began the climb up into the hills. The scenery changed instantly. The practical strip malls and gas stations of my neighborhood were replaced by wrought iron gates, manicured hedges that looked like they were cut with lasers, and driveways long enough to land a small plane on. Wow, Sophie breathed, pressing her face against the window. Is this where she lives now? For the weekend, at least, I muttered, mostly to myself. Camille had sent out the digital invitations 3 months ago. It was not just a birthday party. It was a coronation. She had rented a massive estate in the hills for the event, claiming that her own house was undergoing renovations for a wine cellar that I was fairly certain did not exist. I pulled my silver sedan up to the entrance. It was clean, polished, and mechanically sound. Yet as I idled behind a matte black G-Wagon, I felt that familiar, prickly heat of inadequacy rising on the back of my neck. A valet in a crisp white jacket opened my door. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of judgment before putting on his professional mask. "Welcome, ma'am," he said. I handed him the keys and a $10 bill. I saw him glance at the cash, then at the car, then back at me. I kept my chin up. I earned every cent of that $10. "Come on, Sophie," I said, taking her hand. We walked up the stone steps toward the massive double doors. The house was breathtaking. I had to admit that it was a sprawling modern structure of glass and steel, perched on the edge of a cliff with a panoramic view of the city below. But as we stepped inside, something felt strange. It was too perfect. I have been in nice homes before. I have clients who are wealthy. But usually, a home has a pulse. There are photos on the mantel, a stray book on a side table, a specific scent of the people who live there. This place smelled like industrial cleaner and expensive lilies. The furniture was arranged with geometric precision. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end furniture showroom where you are afraid to sit down. "Aurora, you made it." The voice was high, polished, and dripping with a sweetness that set my teeth on edge. I looked up to see my mother, Evelyn, rushing toward us. She was wearing a dress that I knew cost more than my first car, and her hair was stiff with hairspray. "Hi, Mom," I said, leaning in for a careful hug so I would not crush her silk wrap. She pulled back and looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my dress, a sensible navy blue shift dress I wore for client meetings, and I saw the disappointment flicker before she covered it up. "You look sensible," she said, which was her code for boring. Then she looked down at Sophie. "And look at my granddaughter. That is a very colorful dress. Sophie?" Sophie beamed, oblivious to the slight. "I picked it because it looks like a sunset." "It certainly is bright," my mother said, patting Sophie's head as if she were a golden retriever. "Go on in." "Darling." "Camille is in the main salon." We moved deeper into the house. The main salon was cavernous, filled with people holding flutes of champagne. The noise level was deafening, but it wasn't the warm roar of a family gathering. It was a sharp, performative noise. People were laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I caught snippets of conversation as we wove through the crowd. "We are closing on the villa in Tuscany next month," a man in a linen suit said. "Honestly, first class on that airline has gone downhill terrifically," a woman with too much filler in her lips complained. I told him, "If the boat isn't ready by July, we are suing," another voice boomed. It was a symphony of humble brags and overt displays of wealth, and in the center of it all, sitting on a velvet chaise lounge like a queen holding court, was Camille. My sister looked stunning. I could not deny that. She was wearing a shimmering gold gown that clung to her body like liquid metal. Her hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, and diamonds sparkled at her throat and ears. She was laughing, her head thrown back, one hand resting possessively on the arm of her husband, Derek. Derek Hartwell was a man who always looked like he was posing for a photograph that never got taken. He was handsome in a generic, catalog way, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that never seemed to focus on anything for more than 2 seconds. He was nodding along to whatever Camille was saying, swirling his scotch. "Camille," Sophie called out, tugging my hand forward. Camille stopped laughing and turned her gaze toward us. For a second, just a split second, her face was blank. Then, the mask slid into place. "Aurora and little Sophie," she exclaimed, extending a hand but not standing up. "I am so glad you guys could make it out to the boonies." The guests around her chuckled politely. This place was hardly the boonies. It was one of the most expensive zip codes in the state. "Happy birthday, Camille," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The place is beautiful. Isn't it?" Camille swept her arm around the room. "Derek and I just fell in love with the architecture. We needed something spacious for the party. Obviously, our place is just a construction zone right now with the new pool going in." "It is lovely," I repeated. Sophie stepped forward, holding out her gift. "Happy birthday, Aunt Camille. I got you this." Camille looked at the crumpled wrapping paper. She took it with 2 fingers, as if she were picking up a used tissue. "Oh, how sweet," Camille said. Not opening it, she placed it on the table behind her, right next to a towering stack of boxes wrapped in gold and silver foil, clearly from designer brands. Sophie's small, lumpy package looked pathetic next to them. "I will open it later." "Okay, sweetie. I have to mingle." "Okay," Sophie said, her voice dropping a little. "Go grab some punch," Camille said, dismissing us with a wave of her manicured hand. "The catering staff is bringing out the hors d'oeuvres." I steered Sophie away before she could see the way Camille immediately turned back to a woman wearing a Rolex and started talking about a spa treatment in Switzerland. We found a corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows. I handed Sophie a glass of pink lemonade from a passing tray. She took a sip, looking around the room with wide eyes. "Mom," she whispered, leaning into my side. "Why are those girls looking at me?" I followed her gaze. A group of 3 girls, roughly Sophie's age, were standing near the chocolate fountain. They were dressed in what looked like miniature versions of their mother's couture gowns. They were whispering and giggling. looking directly at Sophie's sunset dress, a dress I had bought at a department store for $40. "They are not looking at you, honey," I lied, smoothing her hair. "They are just looking around." "They are pointing at my shoes," Sophie said, tucking her scuffed ballet flats one behind the other. My heart clenched. I wanted to march over there and tell those children that my daughter was kind, smart, and creative, qualities that money could not buy. But I knew that in this room, those qualities were about as valuable as paper money in a bonfire. "You look beautiful," I told her firmly, "and you are here to celebrate your aunt. That is what matters. We are not here for them. I am here for Sophie." I reminded myself, I am here because despite everything, Sophie loves her aunt. I am not here to compete in Camille's status Olympics. "I need a napkin," Sophie said, pointing to a smudge of lemonade on her hand. "Stay right here," I said. "I will go find one." I made my way through the throng of people, dodging elbows and avoiding eye contact. The air in the room was stifling, heavy with the scent of ambition and insecurity. I needed a moment of quiet. I saw a swinging door that looked like it led to the service area and headed for it. I pushed through the door and found myself in a short hallway, connecting the main salon to the kitchen. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the clanging of pots and the urgent voices of the catering staff. The kitchen was a chaotic scene of stainless steel and steam. Servers in black vests were rushing back and forth with trays of crab cakes and caviar blinis. They looked exhausted. I saw a young woman wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand before picking up a heavy tray. Her eyes met mine for a second, a look of shared humanity that was completely absent in the other room before she hurried out. I grabbed a stack of napkins from a side table and turned to leave. As I did, my eyes caught something on the doorframe of the service entrance. It was a small, plastic placard attached to the wall. It looked like a standard inventory tag for the venue. But what caught my attention was a piece of masking tape that had been slapped over the bottom half of it. The tape was peeling slightly at the corner, likely from the heat of the kitchen or the humidity of the dishwashers. I stepped closer. My instincts as an auditor kicked in. When someone covers something up, my brain automatically asks, why? I reached out and used my fingernail to gently lift the peeling edge of the tape. Underneath the handwritten scrawl that said, "Main Service Int," there was a printed logo. It was a blue crest with the words, "Elite Event Rentals," printed clearly. But it was not just a rental company logo. Beneath that, printed directly onto the plastic of the venue's fixture, was another name, a name that had been hastily covered by a second, smaller sticker that the Elite Event Rentals label was trying to hide. I peeled back the second layer, just a fraction more. Foreclosure Asset Management Group. I froze. Foreclosure. Camille had told everyone she rented this place because her own mansion was being renovated. She had implied this was a high-end vacation rental, the kind owned by a tech billionaire who was away in Tokyo. But Foreclosure Asset Management Group didn't rent out vacation homes to billionaires. They managed properties that had been seized by banks. They managed properties that were sitting empty, waiting for auction. I looked at the sticker again. There was a date code on it, inspected 0424. That was only 2 weeks ago. This wasn't just a rental. This was a seized asset. And usually, to rent a seized asset for an event, you had to jump through incredible hoops, or you had to know someone who was bending the rules. I let the tape fall back into place and smoothed it over with my thumb. A cold feeling settled in my stomach, distinct from the social anxiety of the party. Camille wasn't just showing off. She wasn't just exaggerating her wealth, which was her usual modus operandi. She was staging a lie on a massive scale. And if there is one thing I know from my job, it is that when people go to great lengths to stage a lie, it is because the truth is something they cannot afford to pay for. I turned back toward the swinging door, the napkins clutched in my hand. The laughter from the party drifted through the cracks, sounding even more hollow than before. Camille was out there, playing the queen in a castle that belonged to a bank, surrounded by people who would eat her alive if they knew the truth. I had found the first thread, and without even meaning to, I had the sudden, sinking urge to pull it. I walked back into the main salon with the paper napkins clenched in my hand, the knowledge of the hidden label burning a hole in my pocket. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, or perhaps my perception of it had. Before, it had just seemed like a display of excessive wealth. Now, it felt like a stage set where the actors were frantically ad-libbing to keep the audience from noticing the scenery was made of cardboard. Sophie was exactly where I had left her, standing near the towering glass wall that overlooked the valley. She was clutching her small gift bag with both hands, her knuckles white against the colorful tissue paper. She looked small against the backdrop of the sunset, a splash of genuine warmth in a room that felt clinically cold. "Mom," she said as I approached, her voice laced with relief. "I thought you got lost." "Just took a detour," I said, smoothing the hair back from her forehead. "You still have the present." "I wanted to give it to her properly," Sophie said, looking toward the center of the room where Camille was holding court. "She was busy before. Maybe now is a good time." I looked at my sister. She was currently flanked by two women who looked like they shared the same plastic surgeon. They were laughing at something Camille had said, their heads thrown back in a synchronized display of amusement. It was now or never. "Okay," I said, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Let us go say happy birthday." We navigated the sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses. The air smelled of expensive perfume and truffles. As we approached, Camille's gaze flickered toward us. For a brief moment, I saw a flash of annoyance, as if we were interruptions in her broadcast, before she switched on the beaming smile again. "And here is my little niece," Camille announced, her voice pitching up an octave. "Sophie, look at you." Sophie stepped forward, her shyness battling with her excitement. She held out the bag again, presenting it like an offering. "Happy birthday, Aunt Camille," Sophie said clearly. "I hope you like it. I picked it out myself." The conversation in the circle died down. All eyes were on the exchange. Camille looked at the bag. It was a simple paper gift bag from a local craft market, crinkled slightly at the corners. It stood in stark contrast to the glossy, heavy boxes piled on the table behind her. "Oh, sweetie," Camille said. She reached out and took the bag by the very tip of the handle, her fingers barely making contact. She did not look inside. She did not ask what it was. She simply turned and dropped it onto a side table where empty champagne flutes were gathering. "Just put it there. We do not want to clutter up the main table. Do we?" The dismissal was swift and brutal. I felt Sophie stiffen under my hand. I saw her throat work as she swallowed the lump that must have formed there. She had rehearsed a little speech about the color of the dish and how it matched Camille's eyes. Now, that speech was dying in her throat. "Okay," Sophie whispered. "So polite." One of the women next to Camille cooed. She was wearing a red dress that looked like it cost more than my annual rent. She leaned in toward Camille, keeping her voice low but not low enough. "You are so generous. Camille, always making space for family." The pause before the word family was heavy with implication. It meant poor family. It meant charity case. "Well, you know me," Camille sighed, taking a sip of her drink. "I believe in keeping the circle open. We cannot choose who we are related to, right?" The group laughed again. It was a sharp, jagged sound. I stepped in, placing myself physically between Sophie and the women. "Sophie has excellent taste," I said, my voice level but hard. "She spent weeks finding that for you," Camille blinked, as if surprised I was allowed to speak. "I am sure it is adorable, Aurora. I just said I would open it later. Do not be so sensitive. God, you were always like this growing up, so serious." Before I could respond, my mother appeared at my elbow. Evelyn Hartwell was in her element, holding a glass of wine and beaming at the guests. She looked from Camille to me, and the beam dimmed by about 50%. "Is everyone having a good time?" Mom asked, oblivious to the tension or perhaps choosing to ignore it. She turned to the woman in the red dress. "Have you heard about Camille's latest project? She is consulting for high-end interior design firms now. Just doing it for fun. Really, she has such an eye." I knew for a fact that Camille's consulting consisted of pinning images on Pinterest and criticizing her friends' living rooms. She is amazing, the woman agreed. And what do you do, dear? She turned her gaze to me. Aurora is in banking. Mom interjected quickly. Before I could open my mouth, she said it with a wave of her hand, as if she were brushing away a fly. She works at a branch downtown. Very steady, very practical. I am a senior risk analyst for Stonebridge Credit and Lending, I corrected, looking the woman in the eye. I specialize in fraud detection and asset recovery. The woman's smile faltered for a second. Oh, how intense. It pays the bills, I said. Well, not everyone can have the artistic temperament, Camille said, draping an arm around Mom's shoulders. Aurora loves her spreadsheets. I just feel like life is too short to worry about numbers. You know, you have to live in the moment. Speaking of the moment, the second friend said, checking a diamond-encrusted watch. When is the food coming out? I am starving. It should be circulating, Camille said, a frown creasing her perfect forehead. She scanned the room, her eyes narrowing. The help is so slow today. You simply cannot find good staff anymore. I told the agency I wanted their premium team, and this is what I get. I followed her gaze. A waiter was weaving through the crowd with a heavy tray of appetizers. He looked young, maybe 20 years old, and sweat was beading on his upper lip. His hands were shaking slightly. It was not the shake of incompetence, it was the shake of fatigue. I watched him move. He was not just working, he was running a marathon. There were clearly not enough servers for a party of this size. He offered a tray to a group of men near us, and as he turned, he nearly bumped into a female colleague who was collecting empty glasses. They paused near me, just for a second, thinking they were shielded by the noise of the party. I need a break, the young man muttered, wiping his face with his sleeve. My legs are killing me. Suck it up, the woman whispered back, her voice harsh with stress. The manager said we do not stop until the hot food is out. Besides, if we leave the floor, she might dock us. She cannot do that, the boy said. They changed the payment schedule for the third time. Marco, the woman hissed, we are already working on a promise. Just keep your head down and get paid. They separated and melted back into the crowd. I stood frozen. Changed the payment schedule for the third time. Working on a promise. In the world of business, those were death rattles. A company or a client that shifts payment schedules is a client that does not have the liquidity to pay. Combined with the foreclosure sticker in the kitchen, the picture was becoming high-definition clear. Camille was throwing a 5-figure party on credit, exploiting workers who were too desperate to walk away. Aurora Earth to Aurora. I snapped back to reality. Camille was staring at me, looking amused. You zoned out, she said. I was just telling everyone about our summer plans. We are closing on a lake house in July. It is right on the water. Private dock, 3 stories, the works. Oh, I asked. Where exactly? Up north, Camille said vaguely, waving her hand toward the imaginary north. It is a hidden gem, totally exclusive. We want it to be a sanctuary. You know, a place to disconnect. That sounds expensive, I said. Money is energy, Camille said, reciting a line I had definitely seen on a motivational Instagram post earlier that week. You have to spend it to attract it. We are manifesting abundance. Manifesting, I repeated. Is that what the bank calls it? Camille's eyes hardened. Do not be jealous, Aurora. It gives you wrinkles. Mom laughed nervously. Oh, stop it. You two? Aurora is just cautious. She worries about everything. Camille is the dreamer. We need both types in the world. I suppose. But her tone made it clear which type she preferred. She looked at Camille with a mixture of awe and adoration, like a fan looking at a movie star. She looked at me like I was the accountant who did her taxes necessary, but boring. Sophie tugged on my hand. I looked down. Her face was pale, and her eyes were darting around the room. She looked like she was shrinking, trying to make herself take up as little space as possible. Mom, she whispered. Can we go get some water outside? Excuse us, I said to the group. We need some air. Do not go far, Camille called out as we walked away. I am making a toast in 20 minutes. You do not want to miss it. I guided Sophie through the crowd. Ignoring the glances and the whispers, we found a set of French doors that led out onto a stone terrace. The air outside was cool and fresh, a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. We walked to the edge of the balcony, looking out over the city lights twinkling below. Sophie leaned against the stone railing. She picked at a loose thread on her dress. Mom, she asked softly. Yeah, baby. Why does everyone look at me like that? My heart broke a little. Like what? Like I am in the way, she said. Like I did something wrong just by being here. And Aunt Camille, she did not even look at the dish. She just put it with the trash. I knelt down so I was eye level with her. I took her small hands in mine. They were cold. Listen to me. Sophie, look at me. She raised her eyes, swimming with unshed tears. You did absolutely nothing wrong, I said firmly. You are kind, and you are generous, and you brought a thoughtful gift. That makes you the best person in that room. Then why are they so mean? She asked. Because, I said, choosing my words carefully. Some people feel very small inside, and the only way they know how to feel big is to make other people feel small. They build a tower of money and things to stand on, hoping no one notices that the foundation is empty. Is Aunt Camille empty? Sophie asked. The question hung in the air. I think Aunt Camille is very scared, I said. She is scared that if she stops pretending, people will stop liking her. But that has nothing to do with you. You are enough just as you are. You do not need a lake house or a fancy dress to be important. Sophie nodded slowly. I still wish she opened it. I know, I said, pulling her into a hug. I know. Over her shoulder, through the glass doors, I could see Camille laughing again, holding court. She looked radiant and untouchable, but I knew the truth now. I knew about the foreclosure. I knew about the unpaid staff. I knew about the lies. And as I held my daughter, who was feeling less than because of my sister's vanity, I felt a shift inside me. I had come here to keep the peace. I had come here to survive the evening, but looking at the fake smiles and the exhausted waiters, and feeling my daughter's sadness, I realized that peace was no longer an option. Camille was not just hurting herself with these lies. She was hurting everyone around her to keep the illusion alive. Come on, I said, standing up and smoothing Sophie's dress. Let us go back inside. But remember what I said. You are the real thing in a room full of fakes. Never forget that. Sophie took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, Mom? We turned back toward the doors. I was ready for the toast. In fact, I was looking forward to it, because the higher Camille climbed on her pedestal of lies, the harder the fall was going to be, and I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I needed to be the one to give it a little push. The sound of a silver spoon striking crystal cut through the low hum of conversation like a sniper shot. Clink, clink, clink. The noise was sharp, imperative, and demanding of absolute attention. The room fell silent in waves, starting from the center and rippling outward until the only sound remaining was the distant hum of the industrial refrigerator from the kitchen and the soft clinking of ice in glasses. Camille stood in the center of the main salon, elevated slightly by the step up to the fireplace hearth. She looked every inch the mistress of the manor, bathed in the warm, artificial glow of the chandeliers. She held her champagne flute high, her other hand resting theatrically on her chest, right over her heart, or perhaps more accurately, over the diamond pendant that rested there. "Thank you," she began, her voice breathless and trembling with an emotion I knew she had manufactured in the mirror 10 minutes prior. "Thank you all so much for being here. Truly, my heart is just so full." A low murmur of adoration swept through the crowd. I stood near the periphery with Sophie, my hand resting protectively on her shoulder. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. I watched my sister scan the room, her eyes glossy and bright. To everyone else, she looked overwhelmed by love. To me, she looked like a predator surveying a particularly bountiful hunting ground. You know, Camille continued, stepping down from the hearth and beginning to prowl slowly through the circle of guests. When Derek and I decided to host this little gathering, we wanted it to be about connection, about bringing together the people who matter most. We have all been so blessed this year, so incredibly blessed. She paused to let the word blessed hang in the air, heavy and rich. But with blessings comes responsibility, she said, nodding solemnly to the woman in the red dress. We have to remain grounded. We have to remember where we came from and keep our feet on the earth, even when our heads are in the clouds. I almost laughed. The irony was so thick it was choking me. Here she was, standing in a house she did not own, paid for by a company that did not exist, talking about being grounded while her husband likely hid in the bathroom to avoid debt collectors. Camille continued her monologue, spinning a tale of hard work and good fortune. She talked about the struggle of the renovation on her actual house, painting herself as a martyr for enduring such chaos. She talked about her charitable endeavors, which I knew consisted of attending 2 luncheons a year and buying a table for a tax write-off. As she spoke, her eyes began to wander. She looked past the faces of her friends, past the adoring gaze of our mother, and settled on the side table where the gifts were piled. The glossy boxes from the designer stores were stacked high, a monument to consumerism, but right at the front, marring the perfection, was the small, crumpled paper bag Sophie had brought. Camille's gaze snagged on it. I saw the micro-expression of disgust ripple across her face before she smoothed it away. She looked from the bag to the floor, where a few cocktail napkins had been dropped by careless guests. Then, her eyes lifted and locked onto Sophie. Sophie was watching her aunt with wide, admiring eyes. Despite everything, despite the dismissal earlier, my daughter still looked at Camille as if she were a princess from a storybook. Sophie was smiling, waiting for the speech to end so she could clap. Camille smiled back, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a cat that has just cornered a mouse and decides to play with it before the kill. And speaking of staying grounded, Camille said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, sugary tone that amplified the silence rather than breaking it. We are so lucky to have family here who remind us of the simple things. The room turned to look at us. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from a sudden, primal instinct to shield my child. Sophie, darling, Camille called out. She did not shout, but her voice carried with perfect clarity. Come here for a second. Sophie looked up at me, uncertain. I hesitated. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing, but to refuse would be to cause the scene my mother was so terrified of. I gave a small nod, my hand sliding from Sophie's shoulder to her back. Sophie took 2 steps forward, entering the circle of light. She looked small in her sunset-colored dress and scuffed shoes, surrounded by adults in tuxedos and silk. Yes, Aunt Camille, Sophie asked, her voice small and polite. Camille tilted her head, looking at Sophie with a pitying expression that was theatrical enough for the back row to see. You know, sweetie, Camille said, gesturing vaguely at the scattered napkins on the floor and the empty glasses on the side tables. I was just thinking, since you are here, and you are not really participating in the adult conversation, maybe you could make yourself useful. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Useful? Sophie repeated, confusion wrinkling her brow. Yes, Camille said, her smile widening to show perfect, whitened teeth. You can help the servants clean up. Look at all this mess. Grab a tray or a trash bag. It will be good practice for you. The sentence hung in the air, vibrating with cruelty. It will be good practice. It was not a joke. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, precision strike designed to strip a 10-year-old girl of her dignity in front of 50 strangers. It was Camille telling the world that while her daughter might be a princess, my daughter was help. Time seemed to distort. I saw the faces of the guests. A few of them chuckled a nervous, sycophantic sound from people who were too afraid of Camille to realize how vile she was being. Others looked down at their shoes, uncomfortable but silent. Sophie stood frozen, The smile slid off her face like it had been physically slapped away. Her skin, usually rosy, turned a patchy, blotchy red. She looked down at her hands, then at the floor, then at the waiter standing near the wall. She looked as if she wanted to disappear into the floorboards. She did not move. She did not speak. She just stood there, paralyzed by a shame she did not deserve and could not process. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, like a cable snapping. I took a step forward. Suddenly, a hand clamped onto my forearm. It was a vice grip, surprisingly strong. I looked down. It was my mother. Evelyn was standing beside me, her knuckles white as she dug her nails into my skin. She was not looking at Sophie. She was looking at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Aurora," she hissed, her voice barely a breath. "Do not—" I looked at her, incredulous. "Did you hear what she just said?" "She is just joking," Mom whispered, her voice trembling. "Do not make a scene. Do not ruin this for her. Everyone is watching." "She is humiliating your granddaughter," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She is stressed," Mom pleaded, tightening her grip. "Just let it go. Laugh it off. Please. Aurora. For the family." For the family. That phrase. The shackle that had bound me to silence for 3 decades. The excuse for every slight, every insult, every time Camille had taken something of mine and claimed it was hers. I looked at Sophie. She was trembling now. A single tear had escaped and was tracking through the powder on her cheek. She looked utterly alone in the center of the room. I looked at my mother's hand on my arm, and I ripped my arm away. The force of it made my mother stumble back a step. I did not look at her again. I walked into the circle. I did not run, and I did not stomp. I walked with the steady, rhythmic pace of a woman walking to the gallows to cut down the innocent. I reached Sophie. I ignored Camille. I ignored the guests. I knelt down on the hard marble floor so I was directly in front of my daughter. "Sophie," I said. My voice was calm, but it sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and metallic. She looked at me. Her eyes were swimming with tears, her lower lip quivering as she tried to hold them back. She was fighting so hard to be brave, to be the polite girl I had raised her to be. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking, "do I have to—" "No," I said. "No, you do not." "I can do it," she stammered, looking at the waiter. "I know how to clean." "Sophie, look at me." She locked eyes with me. "You are a guest," I said, loud enough for the people in the front row to hear. "You are not an employee, and you are certainly not here to be someone's entertainment." I stood up. I took Sophie's hand in mine. Her palm was sweaty and cold. I pulled her gently to my side, creating a united front. Then, I turned to Camille. She was still standing there, holding her champagne glass. But the smile had faltered slightly. She looked annoyed that her little play had been interrupted by reality. "Oh, relax, Aurora," Camille scoffed, rolling her eyes. "God, you have zero sense of humor. I was just teasing her. She needs to learn to take a joke." The room was deadly silent now. The uncomfortable shifting had stopped. Everyone was waiting to see if the mouse would bite back. I looked at my sister. I really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the eyes, the desperation of the foreclosure, the pathetic need to stand on someone else's neck just to feel tall. "A joke is when everyone laughs." "Camille," I said. My voice was not loud. I did not shout. I used the same tone I used when I had to tell a client their assets were being frozen cool, professional, and absolute. When a child is standing there crying because she feels ashamed, that is not a joke. That is bullying. Camille's face hardened. Her eyes narrowed into slits. The mask dropped completely. "I am teaching her a lesson," Camille spat out, her voice sharpening. "Someone has to— You coddle her. I am teaching her how the real world works." "And what lesson is that, exactly?" I asked. Camille took a step forward, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and malice. She lowered her voice, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a shout. "I am teaching her to know her place," Camille said. The words hung there. Know her place. It was archaic. It was classist. It was the ugliest thing she could have possibly said. I heard a gasp from someone in the crowd. Even the sycophants knew she had crossed a line. My mother let out a small sob from the sidelines. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone right then and there about the foreclosure tag in the kitchen. I wanted to tell them about the unpaid caterers. I wanted to tell them that the dress Camille was wearing was probably bought on a credit card that was maxed out. I wanted to burn her world down, but I looked at Sophie. She was terrified. She did not need a screaming match. She needed a mother who was in control. She needed to leave. If I exploded now, I would just be the crazy sister causing a scene at the birthday party. I would give Camille exactly what she wanted, the role of the victim. I took a deep breath. I bottled the rage. I compressed it, condensed it, and stored it away in the cold, dark place where I kept my most dangerous assets. "Come on, Sophie," I said. "We are leaving. You walk out that door. Do not expect to come back," Camille hissed. I paused. I looked at her one last time. "Do not worry," I said. "We will not." I turned my back on her. I walked Sophie through the crowd. The guests parted for us like the Red Sea. I saw faces of pity, faces of shock, and faces of judgment. I ignored them all. I kept my eyes on the heavy oak doors at the front of the hall. We walked past my mother. She was standing with her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. She looked at me, pleading silently. I looked right through her. She had made her choice when she held my arm. We stepped out into the cool night air. The valet was standing there, looking bored. He straightened up when he saw us. "Leaving so soon?" "Ma'am," he asked. "Yes," I said. "Please get my car." He ran to retrieve the sedan. I stood there with Sophie on the steps of the fake mansion, shivering slightly in the evening breeze. Sophie leaned her head against my hip. "I am sorry, Mom," she whispered. "Do not ever apologize for her," I said fiercely. "Do you hear me? Never." The car pulled up. I tipped the valet again, got Sophie into the back seat, and climbed into the driver's side. As I started the engine and put the car in gear, I looked back at the house. Through the massive windows, I could see the party resuming. I saw Camille laughing, raising her glass again, spinning the narrative, erasing us from the scene. She thought she had won. She thought she had put us in our place. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "Her place," I whispered to the empty dashboard. Camille wanted to talk about places. Fine, I would teach her about places. I would teach her that her place was not in a mansion she did not own, spending money she did not have, hurting people she did not respect. I would find the paper trail. I would find the debts. I would find the lies. And I would dismantle her life brick by gold-plated brick. I pulled out of the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, mathematical clarity. The party was over. The work was just beginning. The silence in the car was heavier than the humid night air outside. We had been driving for 10 minutes, the city lights blurring past us in streaks of neon and white. But neither of us had spoken a word since we left the gravel driveway of the estate. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt and the soft, hiccuping breaths coming from the passenger seat. I kept my eyes on the road, but my peripheral vision was fixed on Sophie. She was curled in on herself, her knees pulled up to her chest, her head resting against the cool glass of the window. The small gift bag, crumpled and forgotten by everyone else, was still clutched tightly in her hands. "Mom!" Her voice was so small, it barely rose above the hum of the engine. It cracked on the single syllable, a sound that tore through my chest. "I am here, baby," I said, reaching over to rest my hand on her knee. "I am right here," Sophie sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She did not look at me. She kept staring out into the darkness. Does Aunt Camille hate me? I almost slammed on the brakes. The question was so raw, so devoid of anger and filled only with a child's confusion, that it took the breath out of me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. How do you answer that? How do you tell a 10-year-old that her aunt does not hate her, but views her as a prop, an inconvenience, or a target? No, I said firmly, forcing my voice to remain steady. No, Sophie, she does not hate you. Then why did she say that? Sophie turned to me then, her eyes swollen and red. Why did she want me to clean up? She looked at me like I was dirty. I signaled and pulled the car over into the empty parking lot of a closed pharmacy. I could not have this conversation while driving. I put the car in park and turned in my seat to face her. The orange glow of the street lamp overhead washed over us, casting long shadows across her face. Listen to me, I said, taking both of her hands in mine. What happened back there had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with your dress, or your gift, or who you are. It felt like it was about me, she whispered. I know it did, I said. But Aunt Camille is not a happy person. Sophie frowned. But she was laughing. She has a big house. She has all those friends. She has things, I corrected. She has stuff. But people who are truly happy, people who feel good about themselves, they do not need to make other people feel small. Imagine someone climbing a very tall ladder, I said, trying to find an image she could understand. If they are terrified of falling, if they think the ladder is shaking, sometimes they try to push the person below them down, just to make themselves feel higher up. They think if they are standing on someone else, they cannot fall. Sophie absorbed this, her brow furrowed. So she is scared. I think she is terrified, I said honestly. She was trying to look powerful in front of her friends, and the easiest way for a weak person to look strong is to pick on someone who is kind, because she knows you would not fight back. Sophie looked down at the gift bag in her lap. Her fingers traced the rim of the ceramic dish inside. I imagined it differently, she confessed softly. What did you imagine? I asked. I thought she would open it, Sophie said, her voice trembling again. I thought she would see the color and remember that she told me she liked teal, and I thought she would give me a hug, a real one, not the kind where she pats my back and looks away. My heart broke into two distinct pieces. The cruelty of the night wasn't just the public humiliation, it was the destruction of that innocent hope. Camille hadn't just insulted my daughter, she had taken a pure, loving intention and treated it like garbage. I am so sorry, Sophie, I said, leaning over the console to wrap my arms around her. She buried her face in my shoulder and finally let herself cry. I held her until the shaking stopped, stroking her hair. I am so sorry I took you there. I want to go home, she mumbled into my shirt. We are going, I promised. We are going home right now. By the time we unlocked the door to our apartment, it was past 9 o'clock. The familiar scent of our home vanilla candles and laundry detergent hit me like a wave of relief. It wasn't a mansion, it didn't have marble floors, but it was ours, and it was safe. Sophie went straight to her room to change into pajamas. I went to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water, my hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. My phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother. I stared at it. I considered letting it go to voicemail. I knew exactly what she was going to say. But if I didn't answer, she would call 10 more times, and then she would show up at my door. I slid the icon to answer and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Mom? Aurora Bennett. My mother's voice came through, sharp and breathless. I cannot believe you. I simply cannot believe you. I am fine. Thanks for asking, I said dryly, leaning against the counter. Sophie is fine too, despite being humiliated in front of 50 people. You are being so dramatic, Mom snapped. Camille was making a joke. A joke, Aurora. And you had to turn it into a scene. You had to storm out like you were in a soap opera. Do you have any idea how embarrassed poor Derek looked? I do not care about Derek, I said. And I do not care about Camille's guests. She told my daughter to help the servants. She treated her like hired help. She was giving Sophie a chance to be involved, Mom argued. Sophie looked so awkward standing there. Camille was trying to include her. By telling her to take out the trash, I asked, my voice rising. You are so sensitive, Mom sighed, the anger shifting to her familiar, weary disappointment. You have always been this way. You look for insults where there are none. You have a chip on your shoulder because Camille has done well for herself. This is not about jealousy, Mom. Then fix it, she demanded. Call your sister. Apologize for running off. Tell her you were just tired or having a bad day. Keep the peace, Aurora. We are a family. We do not walk out on each other. I am not apologizing, I said calmly. And I am not calling her. If you do not fix this, Mom said, her voice dropping to a warning tone, you are going to find yourself very lonely at Christmas. Good night, Mom, I said, and ended the call. I tossed the phone onto the counter. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was vibrating with frustration. Keep the peace. That was the mantra. Let Camille do whatever she wanted. Treat us however she pleased. And we were supposed to swallow it to keep the peace. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. Camille, I hope you're happy. You made Mom cry. Next time you want to have a tantrum, do it at your own house. Don't ever embarrass me in front of my friends again. They're still talking about how unstable you seemed. I stared at the words. Unstable. That was rich coming from a woman who was living a lie. Sophie walked into the kitchen. She was wearing her oversized t-shirt and holding the gift bag. She looked at me, then at the phone in my hand. Was that Grandma? She asked. Yes, I said. Is she mad? She is confused. I lied. She just wants everyone to be happy. Sophie placed the gift bag on the counter. What should I do with this? I do not want to give it to her anymore. I looked at the bag. I thought about the $15 Sophie had saved. I thought about the time she had spent wrapping it. Then we keep it, I said. It is a beautiful dish. We will put it on the entry table. We can put our keys in it. Every time we see it, we will remember that we are the kind of people who give thoughtful gifts, even if other people are not the kind who know how to receive them. Sophie nodded slowly. Okay, that sounds good. Go to bed, Peanut, I said. I will be in to tuck you in a minute. When Sophie was finally asleep, breathing deeply in the soft light of her room, I went back to the living room. I did not turn on the TV. I did not pick up a book. I sat down at my small dining table and opened my laptop. The anger I had felt earlier had cooled into something hard and sharp. It was the feeling I got at work when a balance sheet did not add up. It was the instinct of a hunter who has caught a scent. Don't ever embarrass me. Camille had written. She was terrified of embarrassment. She was terrified of exposure. I thought about the sticker in the kitchen. Foreclosure Asset Management Group. I thought about the caterers mentioning missed payments. I thought about the desperate, frantic energy beneath Camille's smile. I opened a web browser. I did not log into my work database that would be unethical and leave a digital footprint I did not want. I stuck to public records. In the state where we lived, property records, business licenses, and civil court dockets were all matters of public record if you knew where to look, and I knew exactly where to look. First, I searched for the address of the mansion, 1408 Skyline Drive. The county assessor's website loaded slowly. I typed in the address. The results popped up in black and white. Owner Triton Holdings, LLC, Kala'a West Coast Bank. It was bank-owned. It had been foreclosed upon 6 months ago. But that did not explain how Camille was hosting a party there. Banks did not usually rent out foreclosed mansions for birthday bashes. I opened a new tab and searched for the address combined with keywords like rental and event. Nothing. Then I remembered the other name on the sticker. Elite Event Rentals. I searched for them. Their website was flashy, promising luxury experiences for the discerning client. I clicked on their venues page. There, fourth on the list, was the house on Skyline Drive. The Pinnacle Estate, available for daily and weekly lease. perfect for weddings, corporate retreats, and private galas. I sat back in my chair. So, they didn't own it. They didn't even have a long-term lease. They had rented it for the weekend. That in itself wasn't a crime. Plenty of people rented venues for parties. But Camille had explicitly told everyone, including our mother, that they had bought a new place and were renovating, implying this was just a temporary luxury pad they also owned or leased long-term. She had built her entire persona for the evening around the idea that this level of wealth was her new normal. But there was something else. The rental agreement for a place like that would be astronomical. $5,000 a night, easily, plus the security deposit. I went back to the county clerk's website. I searched for Derek Hartwell. The screen refreshed. A list of civil filings appeared. Small claims Greenleaf Landscaping versus Derek Hartwell. Judgment for plaintiff. Unpaid. Civil suit. Audi Financial Services versus Derek Hartwell. Breach of contract. The list went on. But the most recent filing was from 2 weeks ago. Notice of default. This was for their actual house. The modest 3-bedroom split level they had lived in for 5 years. The house Camille claimed was being renovated. They weren't renovating, they were losing it. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. It wasn't satisfaction. It was a deep, horrifying realization of the scope of the disaster. Camille wasn't just living beyond her means. She was drowning. She was throwing a party that likely cost $20,000 while her actual house was being taken by the bank. She was standing on a trapdoor that was already opening, and she was dragging everyone she could grab onto down with her. And then, I saw it, in the search results for the rental company, Elite Event Rentals. There was a standard contract template available for download. I opened it out of curiosity. It required a credit check and a guarantor for any rental over $10,000. Derek's credit was shot. The court records proved that Camille had never held a job for more than 6 months. So who signed as the guarantor? Who had enough clean credit and assets to secure a rental like that? My stomach dropped. My mother, Evelyn Hartwell, a retired teacher with a paid-off house and a pristine credit score, a woman who would do anything to keep the peace and help her successful daughter. I closed the laptop. The room felt suddenly very cold. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. This wasn't just about my sister being a bully. Camille was running a con, and she had positioned our mother as the safety net that would catch her when she fell. I looked at the darkened hallway where Sophie was sleeping. I had told her that Camille was scared of falling. I was right. But I hadn't realized that when Camille finally fell, she planned to land on us. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The anger I had felt in the car was gone. In its place was a resolve as cold and hard as steel. I wasn't just going to expose Camille. I was going to have to go to war with her, because if I didn't, she was going to take my mother's retirement, my family's stability, and everything we had down into the hole she had dug for herself. I picked up my phone. I didn't reply to Camille's text. I didn't delete it, either. I took a screenshot. It was the first piece of evidence in the file I was about to build. Monday morning arrived with the gray, relentless efficiency of a bank ledger. I sat at my desk at Stonebridge Credit and Lending, surrounded by the comforting hum of servers and the click of keyboards. My dual monitors glowed with spreadsheets and risk assessment algorithms, but my mind was miles away, stuck in the opulent, hollow hallway of the mansion on Skyline Drive. I had spent Sunday decompressing with Sophie, making pancakes and watching cartoons, trying to scrub the memory of Camille's voice from her head. But while my mothering mode was soft and protective, my professional brain was running cold calculations in the background. I needed to know the scope of the lie. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 2 years. Jessica was an old college friend who had pivoted from finance to high-end event planning. If anyone knew the economics of a party like Camille's, it was her. "Aurora," Jessica's voice was bright. "It has been ages. Please tell me you are calling to say you are finally taking a vacation." "I wish," I said, keeping my tone casual. "I actually have a quick industry question for you, a curiosity thing." "Shoot." "I went to a party this weekend at a place on Skyline Drive. The Pinnacle Estate. I think it was called. Do you know it? Oh, absolutely, Jessica said, her tone shifting to professional reverence. That is the crown jewel of rental properties right now. Infinite pool, marble everything. Why are you planning a wedding? Definitely not, I laughed. Just curious. My sister threw her birthday there. I was wondering what a place like that goes for. She made it sound like she got a steal. There are no steals at the Pinnacle, Jessica said flatly. That place is run by a holdings group that is notoriously shark-like. The base rate is $12,000 a night, with a mandatory 48-hour minimum rental, plus a $5,000 security deposit. I wrote the numbers down on a sticky note. $29,000. That was more than Camille made in a year of her sporadic consulting gigs. And they are strict, Jessica added. They do not take checks. Wire transfer or certified funds only. 10 days in advance. They have a legal team on retainer that sues if you scratch the floorboards. Why do you ask? Just doing the math, I said. Thanks, Jess. I hung up. The math was impossible. Derek had judgments against him for unpaid landscaping bills of $500. There was no way they wired nearly $30,000 to a rental company, unless they found a loophole or a lender. My phone buzzed again. I expected it to be my mother, continuing her campaign for peace, but the number on the screen was local and unfamiliar. I swiped to answer. This is Aurora. Hi, is this the contact for the Hartwell event? A female voice asked. She sounded young and harried. This is Sarah from Gourmet Bites Catering. I am really sorry to bother you, but the contact number on the contract is going straight to voicemail, and your number was listed on the emergency contact sheet for the vendors. I frowned. I had not authorized anyone to put me down as an emergency contact. Camille must have pulled my number from her phone and scribbled it down just to fill a blank space on a form. I am the sister of the host, I said carefully. What is the issue? Well, Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. We are trying to process the final balance for the staffing and the bar tab. The credit card on file was declined. Twice. My stomach tightened. Declined? Yes, ma'am. It came back with a code for insufficient funds. And since Mr. Hartwell is not answering, and we have staff who worked overtime, we just need to get this settled. The owner is talking about filing a police report for theft of services if we do not hear back by noon. Theft of services. The image of the young waiter wiping sweat from his brow flashed in my mind. Camille had stood there in her gold dress, mocking my daughter, telling her to help the servants, all while knowing she had no intention or ability to pay those very people. She wasn't just arrogant. She was a predator. She was stealing the labor of working-class people to fuel her ego. I am not the financial contact, I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling in my veins. But I suggest you document everything. Send an email to every address you have. Do not just call. Okay. Sarah sounded defeated. Thanks anyway. I ended the call and stared at my screen. The catering bill was likely another $5,000 or $6,000. The rental was $30,000. The flowers, the valet, the dress. We were looking at a $50,000 weekend. I opened a new browser window. It was time to stop guessing and start verifying. I went to the Secretary of State's business search portal. It was a public database, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. I typed in the name of the LLC I had seen on the sticker in the kitchen Elite Event Rentals. The company popped up, legitimate, active. Then I searched for the company that owned the house, Triton Holdings, also legitimate. Then I tried a different angle. I searched for court records in our county involving Derek Hartwell again. I needed to see if there were new filings. The list was long, as I had discovered the night before, but I dug deeper this time. I looked at the parties involved section of the lawsuits. In 3 of the debt collection cases against Derek, there was a co-defendant listed as a guarantor or co-signer. The name of the co-signer was an LLC called Hartwell Future Ventures. I went back to the business portal and searched for Hartwell Future Ventures. The registered agent was Derek Hartwell. The business address was a PEO box in a strip mall 3 towns over, but it was the manager listed on the filing that made my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't Camille. It wasn't Derek. It was Evelyn Bennett, my mother. I stared at the screen, the white pixels blurring slightly. My mother was listed as the managing member of an LLC that was being sued for debt. I knew my mother's finances. I helped her set up her retirement accounts. I balanced her checkbook when my father passed away. She was terrified of debt. She paid her credit card bill the day it arrived in the mail. There was absolutely no way she would knowingly start a venture capital LLC with her deadbeat son-in-law. I navigated to the Documents tab of the business filing. In our state, the articles of organization were public. I downloaded the PDF. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There, on the signature line, was a digital signature. Evelyn Bennett, DocuSigned ID 4492 AF. Timestamp 11/12/2024, 10:42 p.m. I looked at the timestamp. November 12th. That was 6 months ago. At 10:42 at night, my mother would have been asleep or reading a paperback in bed. She did not even know how to use DocuSign. She still printed out emails to read them. I felt a cold realization wash over me. This wasn't just irresponsibility, this was identity theft. Camille and Derek had used my mother's name and her clean credit history to open a shell company. They were using that company to guarantee their loans, their rentals, and their lifestyle. And when the house of cards collapsed, and it was already collapsing, the creditors weren't going to go after Derek, who was broke. They were going to go after the manager of the LLC. They were going to go after my mother's house, her pension, everything she had saved for 30 years. I grabbed my phone and dialed my mother's landline. My hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, hard fury. "Hello?" Mom answered after 3 rings. She sounded tired. "Mom," I said, skipping the pleasantries, "I need you to answer a question for me, and I need you to be absolutely honest. Do not protect Camille. Just tell me the truth." "Aurora, please," she sighed. "I do not want to talk about the party anymore." "This is not about the party," I said. "Did you sign any papers for Derek regarding a company called Hartwell Future Ventures?" There was a pause. "What? No, of course not. Derek has his own business things. I do not get involved in that." "Did you get an email from DocuSign back in November?" I pressed. "Maybe something Camille told you was for a birthday gift or a subscription." "I do not know," Mom stammered. "Camille handles my email sometimes. She helps me clear out the spam. She said something about updating my security settings a few months ago. Why are you asking me this? You are scaring me." "Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "Camille opened a company in your name. She made you the owner. And that company is currently guaranteeing the debts for the party, for their lifestyle, for everything." "That is ridiculous," Mom said, her voice rising in denial. "Camille would never do that. She is my daughter. She loves me." "She loves your credit score," I said bluntly. "I am looking at the document right now. Mom, it has your electronic signature on it. Did you give her the password to your email?" "Well, yes," Mom admitted weakly. "She said she needed it to set up the family photo sharing album." I closed my eyes. The oldest trick in the book: gain access to the email, trigger the digital signature request, sign it yourself, and delete the confirmation email before the victim ever sees it. It was clean, it was fast, and it was a felony. "Mom, listen to me very carefully," I said. "This is not a family squabble anymore. This is fraud. If we do not fix this, you could lose your house." "My house?" Mom gasped. "But the party was so beautiful. Everyone was so happy." "The party was a lie," I said. "The catering staff is calling me because they have not been paid. The rental company is going to be looking for their $30,000, and when Derek does not pay, they are coming for you." "I have to call her," Mom said, panic creeping into her voice. "I have to ask her." "No," I commanded. "Do not call her. If you call her, she will lie. She will tell you it is a mistake, or that I am jealous, or that she will fix it next week. She will stall until it is too late." "Then what do I do?" Mom sounded small, like a child lost in a supermarket. Aurora, what do I do? You trust me, I said. For once, you stop protecting the daughter who is using you, and you trust the daughter who is trying to save you. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy silence. Okay, Mom whispered. Okay, Aurora. I am coming over after work, I said. We are going to go through everything. Change your passwords. Pull your credit report, and we are going to document every single thing Camille has access to. But we won't get her in trouble, will we? Mom asked, her voice trembling. I do not want her to go to jail. I looked at the PDF on my screen. I looked at the signature that proved my sister had sold our mother down the river for a night of champagne and validation. I am not going to call the police today, I said, choosing my words carefully. But we are going to make sure she can never use your name again, and we are going to make sure she pays for this mess, not you. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. My original plan had been simple revenge. I wanted to embarrass Camille. I wanted to knock her down a peg. But the stakes had changed. This was no longer about a rude comment to Sophie. This was a rescue mission. I thought about the legal implications. Proving unauthorized use of a digital signature was difficult, but not impossible. We would need to match IP addresses. We would need to show that the signature originated from Camille's device, not Mom's computer. I picked up a pen and started a new list. 1. Secure Mom's accounts. 2. Gather all communications from vendors. 3. Map out the timeline of the fraud. 4. Find the leverage. I needed leverage. I needed something that would force Camille to assume the debt herself, to transfer the liability off my mother before the lawsuits hit. I needed to corner her so completely that she had no choice but to confess and take the fall. I looked at the sticky note with the rental cost. $29,000. If the rental company sued, they would name the LLC. They would serve my mother. I needed to get ahead of the process server. I opened one last tab. I searched for the Pinnacle Estate again. I looked for the owner's direct contact info, not the booking agent. I found a name, Marcus Thorne, CEO of Triton Holdings. I didn't email him. Not yet. That was a card to play later. Instead, I printed the articles of organization for Hartwell Future Ventures. I printed the lawsuit summaries. I printed the invoice from the catering company that Sarah had just emailed me. I clipped them all together into a neat, damning stack. Camille had told Sophie to clean up. She had wanted to teach my daughter a lesson about her place in the world. I placed the folder in my bag. Tonight, I was going to start cleaning up, and the first thing I was going to scrub was my sister's name off my mother's financial life. Camille wanted to play the part of the rich socialite fine. I was going to make sure she paid the bill. Every single cent of it. I sat across from Elena in a booth at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the county courthouse. Elena and I had gone to university together, and while I had gone into the rigid world of risk assessment, she had pivoted into contract law. She was sharp, unsentimental, and exactly the kind of person you wanted in your corner when your family tree started rotting from the inside out. I slid the stack of papers across the table. It contained the articles of organization for Hartwell Future Ventures, the debt collection notices, and the digital signature logs I had pulled the night before. Elena took a sip of her black coffee and started reading. She did not gasp. She did not shake her head. She simply turned the pages with a rhythmic, practiced efficiency. After 10 minutes, she set the papers down and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "This is a mess, Aurora," she said. It was a statement of fact, not an emotional judgment. "I know," I said. "I need to know how to fix it. Specifically, I need to know how to fix it for my mother without sending my sister to prison today. I want the option, but I do not want to pull that trigger unless I have to." Elena tapped a fingernail on the printout of the digital signature. "Technically, this is identity theft and fraud. If your mother claims she did not sign this, the creditors will go after the person who did. That is Camille. If your mother stays silent, the law assumes she authorized it, even if she did not hold the pen. It is called ratification. If she knows about the fraud and does nothing to stop it while the company continues to accrue debt, she becomes liable. That was the lever I needed. So, to save herself, she has to disavow the signature, I clarified. Explicitly and in writing, Elena confirmed. She needs to file an affidavit of forgery with the Secretary of State. She needs to notify the creditors that the account was opened fraudulently, and she needs to lock her credit down immediately. And if she does that, then the creditors pivot, Elena said, leaning back. They will look at who actually benefited from the funds. They will look at the IP addresses. They will pierce the corporate veil and go after Camille and Derek personally. It will not be pretty for them, but your mother will be clear. That is the goal, I said. I am not looking for a street fight. I want a surgical removal of my mother from this cancer. Then stop acting like a sister and start acting like an auditor, Elena advised. Document everything. Do not rely on phone calls. If it is not on paper, it did not happen. I left the coffee shop with a clear battle plan. I wasn't going to scream at Camille. I was going to bury her in paperwork. I drove straight to my mother's house. She was waiting for me in the kitchen, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. The dark circles under her eyes told me she hadn't slept. Did you call her? Mom asked, her voice trembling as I walked in. No, I said, placing my laptop on the table. And neither did you. Right? I wanted to, Mom admitted, twisting a tea towel in her hands. I just want to ask her why. Aurora, maybe there is a reasonable explanation. There is no reasonable explanation for stealing your identity, Mom, I said gently but firmly. Now, sit down. We have work to do. For the next 2 hours, I turned my mother's kitchen into a command center. We logged into the 3 major credit bureaus. I watched my mother's face pale as we saw the inquiries. There were credit checks for a luxury car lease, a high-end furniture rental, and a business line of credit, all within the last 4 months. I did not authorize any of these, Mom whispered, staring at the screen. I know, I said. We are freezing it all. I walked her through the process. We placed a fraud alert on her file. We froze her credit report so no new accounts could be opened. Then, we went into her email. I need to see your trash folder, I said. I empty it every week, Mom said. Let us check the recovery folder, I said. It took me 10 minutes of digging, but I found it. A notification from DocuSign dated November 12th. It had been moved to the trash, and then deleted from the trash. But the server had a 30-day retention policy for permanent deletion. I opened the log. Viewed by IP address, 192.168. I checked the IP address against my mother's home router. It didn't match. I pulled out my phone and checked a website that geolocated IP addresses. The address on the signature log traced back to a residential provider in the exact suburb where Camille and Derek lived. Here is the smoking gun, I said, pointing to the screen. This signature was made from a computer in Camille's house. Where were you on November 12th? I opened the calendar app on Mom's phone. November 12th, Mom murmured, leaning in. That was a Tuesday. I was at bingo. And then I went to dinner with the ladies from the church. You were out of the house from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock, I noted. The signature was time-stamped at 7:30. You physically could not have signed this from your desktop computer. I printed the calendar entry. I printed the IP log. I stapled them together. This is your shield, Mom, I said. This proves you did not do it. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. It was Sarah from the catering company again. I hesitated, then picked up. Hi, Sarah, I said. Ms. Bennett? Sarah sounded desperate. I am sorry to call again, but I just spoke to the venue manager at the Pinnacle. He said he is locking the gates if the remaining balance on the rental isn't wired by tomorrow, and Mr. Hartwell is not answering. Sarah, listen to me, I said, keeping my voice low so my mother wouldn't spiral further. I am going to give you some advice, not as a family member, but as someone who works in risk. Stop calling Derek. He is not going to pay you. He does not have the money. But we have a contract, Sarah stammered. Then enforce it, I said. Do not yell. Do not threaten. Send a formal demand letter via certified mail to the business address on your contract. Copy the registered agent, state the amount owed and the date of breach. Create a paper trail that a judge can read. But that takes so long, she said. It is the only way you are going to get paid, I said. And Sarah, make sure you address it to the LLC and name Derek Hartwell as the primary contact. Do not let them tell you it is a personal expense. Keep it corporate. I hung up. I was guiding the missiles, ensuring they hit the right target. If the vendors sued the LLC and Mom could prove fraud, the liability would slide right off her and land squarely on Derek and Camille. Then, the phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made the air in the kitchen drop 10 degrees. Camille. Mom froze. She looked at the phone like it was a bomb. Do not answer it, I ordered. But I will take it, I said. I picked up the phone and swiped the green icon. I put it on speaker so Mom could hear, but I signaled for her to stay silent. Hello, Camille, I said. Oh, it is you? Camille's voice came through, high and tight. I was calling Mom. Is she there? She is busy, I said. She is helping me with some paperwork. What do you need? I do not need anything, Camille said, a little too quickly. I was just checking in, making sure she's okay after you dragged her out of the party so dramatically. I was worried you might have upset her. The gaslighting was almost impressive in its audacity. Mom is fine, I said calmly. We are just going through her credit reports, doing a little financial spring cleaning. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long but heavy pause where I could practically hear Camille's heart rate spike. Why would you do that? Camille asked, her voice dropping an octave. Mom has great credit. She does not need to worry about that stuff. You never know, I said, flipping a page of the credit report loudly enough for the microphone to pick up. Identity theft is on the rise. We found some very interesting inquiries from a company called Hartwell Future Ventures. We are just preparing the affidavits to send to the fraud department. Wait, Camille said. The panic was audible now. Wait, Aurora, you do not need to do that. Those things are probably just glitches. You know how banks are. I do know how banks are. Camille, I said, that is literally my job, and banks do not make glitches that include digital signatures from specific IP addresses. Aurora, listen to me, Camille hissed. You are blowing this out of proportion. If you file a fraud report, it causes a huge mess. It freezes everything. It could hurt Mom. Actually, I said, Elena tells me it protects Mom. It hurts the person who committed the fraud. But since Mom didn't do it, she has nothing to worry about. Unless you know something we don't. I am just saying, Camille's voice turned wheedling. Maybe we should talk about this in person. Just family. No lawyers. No banks. I can explain everything. There is nothing to explain, I said. I only listen to what is filed in court records. Camille, and right now, the records are telling a very interesting story. You are such a bitch, Camille snapped, the mask slipping completely. You are jealous because I have a life and you are just a miserable teller. Risk analyst, I corrected automatically. Goodbye, Camille. I hung up. I looked at Mom. She was staring at the phone, tears streaming down her face. She knew, Mom whispered. She knew exactly what you were talking about. She didn't ask what the company was. She didn't ask about the debt. She just told me not to report it. Yes, I said. She lied to me, Mom said, her voice breaking. She stood right here in this kitchen, ate my food, hugged me, and then went home and stole my name. She did, I said. I moved to the chair next to her and took her hand. And she did it because she knew you would let her. She knew that if you caught her, you would be too afraid of ruining the family to stop her. Mom looked down at her hands. I just wanted to help her. She always seemed so desperate for approval. I thought if I supported her. There is a difference between support and being a hostage, Mom, I said. Loving her does not mean letting her drown you. If you let her keep this debt in your name, you lose this house. You lose your independence. And then what are you going to move in with Camille and Derek? Into a house they are being evicted from. Mom shuddered at the thought. No, she said. No, I cannot do that. Then we have to finish this, I said. We have to file the papers. We have to send the letters. Mom took a deep breath. She wiped her eyes. She looked at the stack of evidence I had compiled, the timeline, the IP addresses, the calendar. Okay, she said. Her voice was weak, but it was there. Tell me where to sign. My real signature. I spent the rest of the afternoon drafting the letters. I kept them clinical. To whom it may concern, the account listed below was opened without the knowledge or consent of Evelyn Bennett. Please find attached the affidavit of forgery and the police report reference number. We did not file the police report yet, that was the final nuclear option, but I drafted the narrative for it so it was ready to go. By the time I packed up my bag, the sun was setting. I felt exhausted, but my mind was clear. I wasn't going to storm into Camille's next party and throw a drink in her face. That was what people did in movies. In the real world, revenge was a certified letter delivered by a process server. Revenge was a credit freeze that declined a transaction at a crucial moment. Revenge was the slow, crushing weight of bureaucracy closing in on a liar. I hugged my mother at the door. You did the right thing, I told her. It does not feel good, she said. Surgery never feels good, I said, but it saves your life. I walked to my car. I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from a number I recognized as Derek's cell. I didn't call back. Let them sweat. Let them wonder how much I knew. Let them scramble to find a new lie to cover the old one. I had the timeline. I had the IP address. I had the timeline of the Pinnacle Estate rental agreement, which matched the date Mom was at the dentist. I had found that receipt in her purse later in the afternoon. I pulled out of the driveway. As I turned onto the main road, I felt a strange sense of calm. Camille had told Sophie to learn her place. I tapped the steering wheel. I was currently filing the paperwork to define exactly what that place was. And it wasn't a mansion on a hill. It was a defendant's chair in a civil courtroom. The backlash did not take long to arrive. In fact, it hit with the speed and ferocity of a tropical storm. By Tuesday afternoon, the narrative had already been rewritten. I was no longer the sister who had defended her daughter from a cruel insult. I was the jealous, bitter spinster who had caused a scene because she could not handle seeing her younger sister succeed. My phone was flooded with messages from aunts and cousins I had not spoken to in years. They ranged from, "Family is everything, just apologize," to more direct accusations that I was trying to ruin Camille's moment out of spite. Camille was working the phones. She was crying to anyone who would listen, painting a picture of a mental breakdown I had supposedly suffered at the party. She told them I was hysterical. She told them I was envious of her new home. She told them I had screamed at our mother. I ignored them all. I did not engage. I knew that in a war against a narcissist, defending yourself against the lies only validated them. You had to ignore the noise and aim for the signal. But then, Camille crossed a line that took the breath out of my lungs. It was Wednesday morning. I was at my desk at Stonebridge Credit and Lending, finalizing a quarterly risk report, when my internal chat pinged. Please report to the Director of Compliance's office immediately. My stomach dropped. In banking, a summons to compliance is never a social call. It is the equivalent of being read your rights. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the linoleum, trying to keep my breathing even. I knew I had done nothing wrong. I knew I had been careful. But fear is irrational, and the thought of losing my license, my livelihood, because of my sister's vendetta made my hands shake. I entered the office. Mr. Henderson, the Director of Compliance, was sitting behind his desk. Next to him was a representative from HR. "Sit down, Ms. Bennett," Henderson said. His voice was devoid of warmth. I sat. "We received a formal complaint this morning regarding your conduct," Henderson began, sliding a printed email across the desk. "The complainant alleges that you have used your position at Stonebridge to access private financial records of family members without authorization. specifically those of Camille and Derek Hartwell, and that you are using this confidential information to blackmail them. I looked at the email. It was from Camille. It was long, rambling, and filled with keywords designed to trigger an immediate internal audit breach of privacy, unethical data mining, targeted harassment. She had actually done it. She was trying to get me fired. She was willing to destroy my career to stop me from exposing her fraud. "This is a serious accusation, Aurora," the HR representative said softly. "Accessing accounts of friends or family is a zero-tolerance violation." I took a deep breath. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I expected this might happen," I said, my voice steady. "I have never accessed the profiles of Camille or Derek Hartwell on our internal systems. You can check my keystroke logs and my search history. I welcome that audit." I opened the folder. "However," I continued, "I have been conducting an investigation into identity theft committed against my mother, Evelyn Bennett. All the information I have gathered has been obtained through public county court records, the Secretary of State's business portal, and documents my mother voluntarily shared with me." I slid the stack of papers toward Henderson. "Here is the printout of the civil judgments against Derek Hartwell, obtained from the county clerk's public website. Here are the articles of organization for the shell company they opened, obtained from the Secretary of State. And here is a signed affidavit from my mother, granting me power of attorney to assist her in securing her compromised accounts." Henderson picked up the papers. He adjusted his glasses. He read through the court dockets, the foreclosure notice I had printed from the bank's public listing, and the fraud alert confirmation. The silence in the room stretched for 2 long minutes. Finally, Henderson looked up. The cold suspicion in his eyes had been replaced by a look of grim understanding. "These are public records," he muttered. "Yes, sir," I said. "I know the rules. I value my license too much to break them. My sister is currently under significant financial pressure due to pending litigation and debts. She is attempting to discredit me because I'm helping our mother separate her finances from my sister's failing ventures." Henderson handed the papers to the HR rep. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "We will still have to run a formal audit of your terminal usage." Henderson said, "It is protocol, but assuming your logs match your story, this complaint will be dismissed as malicious." "Thank you," I said. "I am happy to cooperate fully." "And Ms. Bennett," Henderson added as I stood up, "if this individual contacts the bank again, refer her to our legal department. We do not take kindly to false reports filed as leverage in domestic disputes." "Understood," I said. I walked out of the office. My knees felt like water, but my head was high. Camille had fired her biggest gun. She had tried to take away my ability to feed my daughter, and she had missed, but the war was leaking into every part of my life. When I got home that evening, the atmosphere in the apartment was heavy. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, but her pencil was not moving. "Hey, Peanut," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl, the cheap plastic one, not the ceramic dish Sophie had bought, which now sat proudly on the entry table. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "Everything okay?" Sophie hesitated. She looked down at her math book. "Grandma called the house phone before you got home." I picked up. I froze. "What did she say?" "She was crying," Sophie said. "She asked if you were home. When I said no, she said she just wanted everyone to stop fighting. She said she misses us." Sophie looked up at me, her eyes wide and fearful. "Mom, is this my fault?" The question hit me harder than the meeting with compliance. "What?" I pulled out a chair and sat down next to her. "Why would you think that—" "Because of the party," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "Because I couldn't clean up, because I made Aunt Camille mad. If I hadn't given her that present, none of this would be happening." "Oh, Sophie," I said, pulling her into a hug. "No, absolutely not." I pulled back so I could look her in the eye. I needed her to understand this. "Listen to me. The cracks in the wall were already there long before we walked into that house. Aunt Camille and Uncle Derek, They have made some very bad choices for a long time, choices about money, and choices about how they treat people. But everyone is mad now, Sophie said. They are mad because the truth is coming out, I said. Imagine if someone built a house out of rotten wood, but they painted it gold. It looks pretty, right? But eventually, the wood breaks. When it breaks, it is not the fault of the person who touched it. It is the fault of the person who used rotten wood. So I didn't break the family. You are the best part of this family, I said fiercely. Adults choose their behavior. Aunt Camille chose to be mean. Grandma chose to be afraid. And I am choosing to protect us. You are just a kid. Your only job is to do your math homework and be your awesome self. Sophie nodded, a little of the tension leaving her shoulders. Okay. I am going to make spaghetti, I said, kissing her forehead. Focus on those fractions. As I was boiling the water, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Elena. Subject: new development. Vendor lawsuit. I opened it. Elena had been monitoring the court filings for any new activity involving Derek or the LLC. Aurora. Take a look at this. Filed this afternoon. A floral design company is suing for breach of contract. $11,000. But look at Exhibit C. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF of the lawsuit. I scrolled down to Exhibit C. It was a chain of emails between Derek Hartwell and the owner of the floral company. The florist was asking for a deposit. Derek was stalling. From Derek Hartwell to Petals Vines. Designs. Subject: repayment inquiry. Don't worry about the liquidity. We are just moving some funds around between accounts. You know how it is. Besides, my sister-in-law is Aurora Bennett. She is a senior risk analyst at Stonebridge. Our family is in banking. We are good for it. I can have her vouch for us if you are really that worried. I stared at the screen. The water on the stove boiled over, hissing as it hit the burner. But I didn't move. They hadn't just used my mother's credit. They had used my name. They had used my professional reputation. The one I had built over 12 years of late nights and perfect audits, as a collateral pledge to scam a florist. Our family is in banking, as if I were a partner in their crimes, as if my job at a reputable institution somehow sanctified their grift. This explained why the vendors had been so patient. This explained why they had extended credit 3-4 times. They thought they were dealing with a banking dynasty, not a couple of con artists. I turned off the stove. I wasn't hungry. I called my mother. Hello? She sounded exhausted. Mom, put the phone on speaker, I said. Is anyone else there? Your Aunt Linda is here, Mom said. She came over to talk to me about the situation. Good, I said. I want Aunt Linda to hear this too. Aurora, really, I think we have had enough drama. Aunt Linda's voice drifted in, patronizing and sharp. You need to stop persecuting your sister. She is distraught. Aunt Linda, I said, my voice cutting like a razor. Derek put my name in writing to a vendor to secure credit he had no intention of paying. He told a business owner that because I work at Stonebridge, their money was safe. There was a silence on the line. Even Aunt Linda, who worshipped the ground Camille walked on, knew that using a relative's professional credentials to secure a loan without their consent was indefensible. He did what Linda asked. He used me as a shield, I said, just like they used Mom as a guarantor. They are not just bad with money. Linda, they are using us. They are selling our names to buy flowers and champagne. I heard a rustling sound, then my mother's voice, closer to the phone this time. He used your name, Mom asked. Your job? Yes, Mom. I have the email. It is part of a lawsuit filed today. He knows how hard you worked for that license, Mom whispered. He does not care, I said. Camille does not care. They tried to get me fired this morning. Mom, Camille sent a complaint to my boss saying I was stealing her data. She tried to have me terminated. I heard a gasp. She tried to get you fired, Mom repeated. The disbelief in her voice was turning into something else, something harder. Yes, because I am the only one telling the truth. But you pay Sophie's tuition, Mom stammered. You need that job. Exactly. There was a long pause. I could hear Aunt Linda starting to say something, probably another excuse, another plea for peace. Well, maybe she was just panicked. Evelyn, you know how stress can… Enough. The word was not shouted. It was spoken with a flat finality that I had not heard from my mother in 20 years. Evelyn, Linda asked. I said enough. Linda, Mom said. Her voice was shaking, but it was the shaking of a dormant volcano waking up. She stole my identity. She tried to destroy Aurora's career. She humiliated Sophie. But she is your daughter, Linda argued. So is Aurora, Mom said. And Aurora is the only one who isn't lying to me. I felt a lump form in my throat. I sat down at the kitchen table, gripping the phone. Mom, I said softly, I am going to the bank tomorrow. Aurora, Mom said, I want to sign whatever papers you have. I want my name off everything. I do not care if they lose the house. I do not care if they lose the cars. I am done paying for it. Okay, Mom, I said. I will pick you up at 9. Linda, you can leave now, Mom said. The phone clicked off. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in my life, my mother had chosen the truth over the image. She had chosen the daughter who was there, over the daughter who was a mirage. I checked my email one last time. There was a notification from the rental company, forwarded by Sarah. They had seen the news about the Floral lawsuit. They were getting nervous. And then I saw a post on social media. A mutual friend had screenshotted it and sent it to me. It was from Camille. Some people are so toxic they will invent anything to bring you down. Staying strong for my family. Haters gonna hate. Hate blessed, but under the post, the comments were different than usual. Hey Camille, is it true about the lawsuits? Asked one. My cousin works for the catering company. He said checks are bouncing. Wrote another. Camille was deleting them as fast as she could, but she couldn't catch them all. The cracks were showing. She was losing control of the narrative. She could no longer smile and pose her way out of this. I closed my laptop. I had defended my job. I had reassured my daughter. And I had finally won my mother to my side. The counterattack was over. Now, it was time to close the trap. The storm I had been predicting finally made landfall on a Thursday evening. I was at my mother's house, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of files that had grown steadily over the last 48 hours. The house was quiet, filled with the scent of the herbal tea I had brewed for Mom to help calm her nerves. She was sitting opposite me, her glasses perched on the end of her nose, reading through a credit dispute letter I had drafted. Her hand shook slightly every time she had to sign her name, her real signature, not the digital forgery my sister had created. Then, we heard tires screech in the driveway. It was not the sound of a car parking. It was the sound of a vehicle being abandoned. A car door slammed. Then the front door flew open without a knock. Camille stood in the entryway. She looked like a funhouse mirror version of the woman who had held court at the mansion just 5 days ago. Her hair, usually lacquered into submission, was pulled back in a messy knot. She was wearing designer sweatpants and a t-shirt, but her face was devoid of makeup, revealing the blotchy red skin of someone who had been crying or screaming for hours. She did not look at me. She went straight to Mom. "Mom!" she wailed, rushing across the room and throwing herself onto her knees beside Mom's chair. It was a performance worthy of a daytime soap opera. "You have to stop her. You have to tell her to stop." Mom stiffened. The pen hovered over the paper. I saw the conflict wash over her face instantly. This was her baby. This was the golden child who, until this week, could do no wrong. The instinct to comfort, to soothe, to fix, was fighting against the cold, hard reality of the bank statements on the table. "Camille," Mom said, her voice wavering. "Please, get up." "I cannot," Camille sobbed, clutching Mom's hand. "Do you know what she is doing? She is ruining us. She is telling people we are criminals. Derek is having a panic attack in the car. He cannot even breathe." I sat perfectly still. I took a sip of my tea. I did not speak. I waited. "She is saying, 'I stole from you,'" Camille cried, looking up at Mom with wide, wet eyes. "Me, your daughter. How can you believe her? I would never hurt you. You know that, right? Tell me you know that." Mom looked at Camille, then she looked at me. I saw the crack in her resolve. It is a terrible thing to watch a mother realize her child is a predator, and even more terrible to watch her try to deny it. "Aurora says," Mom started, her voice weak. "Aurora showed me the papers, Camille, the company, the debt." "That was Derek," Camille shrieked, pivoting instantly to throw her husband under the bus. "He made a mistake. He told me he was handling the paperwork for the business loan, and he must have clicked the wrong box or used the wrong autofill. He is an idiot. Mom, you know that. But he didn't mean to steal. It was just a mix-up. We were going to fix it as soon as the investment money came in." It was a lie so lazy it was almost insulting. "A mix-up," Mom repeated, hope flickering in her eyes. "You mean he didn't mean to use my name?" "Of course not," Camille insisted, squeezing Mom's hands. "He probably just put you down as a reference, and the stupid bank system put you as the owner. You know how technology is. It is all glitches, but Aurora is turning it into a federal case. She is trying to send Derek to jail over a typo." Mom looked at me. "Aurora, could it be a mistake if Derek just clicked the wrong button?" This was the danger zone. This was the moment where, for 30 years, I would have rolled my eyes and walked away, letting them rewrite history to keep the peace. But I thought about the foreclosure notice. I thought about the unpaid waiters. I thought about Sophie standing in the center of that room, humiliated. "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through Camille's sobbing like a blade. I opened the folder in front of me. I pulled out 3 sheets of paper and slid them across the table, right into the space between Mom and Camille. "This is not a typo, Camille," I said, keeping my tone clinical. "This is a digital audit trail." Camille glared at me, the tears vanishing instantly, replaced by a flash of pure venom. "You and your stupid spreadsheets! Look at it." "Mom," I said, ignoring Camille. "This shows the IP address where the signature was created. It matches Camille's home network. And this," I pointed to the second document, "is the email confirmation sent to your account, which was accessed, opened, and then permanently deleted from the server within 3 minutes of the signature." I looked directly at my sister. "Derek is lazy," I said, "but he is not tech-savvy enough to scrub a server log. You are—" Camille stood up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The victim act was failing. So she switched tactics. She went on the offensive. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" she spat. "You have been waiting your whole life for me to screw up. You are so jealous you can barely breathe. You cannot stand that I have a life that is bigger than your little apartment and your boring job." "I am not jealous of fraud, Camille," I said calmly. "And I am definitely not jealous of the fact that you are $300,000 in debt." "It is leverage," Camille shouted. "It is how business works. You borrow to build, but you wouldn't understand that. You are too busy counting pennies and buying discount clothes for your kid." "Do not bring Sophie into this," I warned. The temperature in the room dropped. "Oh, please," Camille scoffed, rolling her eyes. "That is what this is really about, isn't it? You are still butthurt because I made a joke at the party. You are blowing up my entire life because Sophie is too sensitive to handle a little teasing." "Sophie is 10, I said. "She is soft," Camille countered. "I was doing her a favor, toughening her up. If she cannot handle a comment about cleaning up, how is she going to handle the real world? I was trying to teach her something." Mom made a small noise of distress. "Camille, don't. It was not nice. It was a joke." Camille threw her hands up. "God, everyone is so fragile. I said she could help the servants. So what? It is good practice. It teaches humility." I stood up slowly. I walked around the table until I was standing 2 feet from my sister. I was taller than her in her flat shoes. I looked her in the eye. Humility, I repeated. That is an interesting word coming from a woman who is currently begging her mother to take the fall for her crimes. I am not begging, Camille hissed. I am explaining. Let me explain something to you, I said. A joke is when the people listening laugh. When a child stands in front of a room full of strangers, burning with shame because her aunt just called her a servant. That is not comedy. That is cruelty. That is you needing to step on someone small to feel tall. You are twisting it, Camille said. But she took a half step back. And as for toughening her up, I continued, my voice steady but hard as iron. Sophie is already tougher than you will ever be. She walked out of there with her head high. She didn't lie. She didn't blame anyone else. The second things get hard, you come running here to hide behind Mom's skirt and blame your husband. Camille's face turned a violent shade of red. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. You do not know anything about my life, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You sit there in your safe little bubble. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under. You have no idea what it takes to maintain this image. The words hung in the air. Maintain this image. It was the most honest thing she had said in years. And there it is, I said softly. The image. Yes, the image, Camille screamed. Derek's business relies on connections. We have to look successful to get investors. We have to live in the right neighborhood, drive the right cars, throw the right parties. If we look poor, nobody will touch us. I am doing this for our future. I am doing this so we don't end up average, like you. I looked at her with a sudden, profound sense of pity. It wasn't smugness, it was just sadness. She was running on a treadmill that was set to a speed she could never match, and she was willing to throw her own family into the gears just to keep it moving. Camille, I said, Image does not pay the rent. Image does not pay the catering staff, and Image certainly does not buy self-respect. It buys opportunities, she insisted. No, I said. It buys debt, and right now, it has bought you a mountain of legal trouble that Mom is not going to pay for. I turned back to the table and picked up the pen. I handed it to Mom. Mom, I said, you have a choice. You can believe the story about the glitch. Sign nothing, and let the bank take this house when Camille defaults next month, or you can sign the affidavit, protect yourself, and force Camille to face the reality she has been running from. Mom looked at the pen, then she looked at Camille. Camille's face was twisted in a mixture of fear and entitlement. She looked like a child who had been told playtime was over. Mom, don't, Camille whispered. If you sign that, the bank comes after me. They will freeze our accounts. They will take the cars. They are going to take them anyway. Camille, I said. The only question is whether they take Mom down with you. Mom closed her eyes. A tear tracked down her cheek. Her hand trembled, but she gripped the pen. I love you, Camille, Mom said, her voice barely a whisper. I love you so much, but I worked for 40 years for this home. Your father and I worked so hard. Mom, Camille stepped forward. No, Mom said. She opened her eyes. They were full of pain, but they were clear. Aurora is right. I cannot fix this for you. Not this time. Mom pressed the pen to the paper. The scratching sound of the ink was the loudest thing in the room. She signed her name, then she dated it. She pushed the paper across the table to me. Take it, Mom said. Send it. Camille stared at the paper. For a second, I thought she might lunge for it. I shifted my weight, ready to block her, but she didn't move. She just deflated. The energy, the anger, the manic desperation just leaked out of her, leaving her looking small and gray. You are making a mistake, Camille said dully. You are choosing her over me. I am choosing the truth, Mom said, and I am choosing to sleep at night. Camille looked at me one last time. There was no fire left in her eyes, just a cold, empty hatred. I will never forgive you for this, she said to me. I know, I replied. But one day, when you aren't drowning in lies, you might realize I did you a favor. Camille turned and walked out. She didn't slam the door this time. She just left it open. We heard the car start, the engine revving too high, and then the sound of her driving away into the darkness. I walked over and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I went back to the table and gathered the papers. I put the signed affidavit in my folder. It was done. Mom was safe. But as I looked at my mother, slumped in her chair, weeping silently into her hands, I knew that the victory was hollow. Camille was gone, but the wreckage she had left behind was immense, and the war wasn't over. The affidavit would protect Mom from the past debts, but the civil lawsuits were already in motion. The creditors were circling, Camille and Derek were about to be cornered, and desperate people do dangerous things. I wasn't just an auditor anymore, I was the gatekeeper, and I had to make sure that when the walls of Camille's life finally collapsed, the debris didn't land on the people I loved. "I will make tea," I said gently to Mom. "We will get through this." "She hates me," Mom sobbed. "She hates herself," I said. "You just stopped letting her use you as a mirror." I walked to the stove. The blue flame flickered to life. I watched it dance. The emotional heavy lifting was done. Now came the cold, clinical execution of the legal strategy. Camille had said she would never forgive me. That was fine. I didn't want her forgiveness. I wanted her to learn the lesson she had tried to teach my daughter. I wanted her to know her place, and her place was about to be in a courtroom, explaining to a judge why image was not a valid form of currency. The knock on my mother's front door came at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. It was not the rhythmic, friendly knock of a neighbor returning a borrowed cup of sugar, nor was it the hesitant tap of a delivery driver. It was 3 hard, authoritative raps that demanded an answer. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen island with a mug of black coffee and my laptop open. I had stayed over the last few nights, sleeping in my old childhood bedroom, keeping a vigil over my mother like a guard dog at the gates. Mom was still in her robe, buttering a piece of toast. She froze, the knife hovering in midair. "Who could that be?" she whispered, her eyes darting to me with the skittish fear of a hunted animal. "Stay here," I said. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. A man in a windbreaker stood on the porch, holding a thick manila envelope and a clipboard. I knew exactly what he was. In my line of work, we called them the Grim Reapers of the civil court system. I opened the door. "Evelyn Bennett?" the man asked, looking past me to where my mother stood in the hallway shadows. "I am her daughter," I said. "I have power of attorney. You can give them to me." He checked his clipboard, verified my name, and handed me the stack. "You have been served." He turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door and locked it. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, not just with the weight of the paper, but with the density of the trouble inside. I walked back to the kitchen and slit the seal open. "Is it the bank?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "It is a subpoena," I said, scanning the cover sheet, "and a summons from the Superior Court." I laid the documents out on the table. It was a request for production of documents regarding the assets of Hartwell Future Ventures, and right there, listed as a person of interest and guarantor, was Evelyn Bennett. The legal machinery had started to turn. My affidavit of forgery had been filed, but the court system is a slow-moving beast. To the plaintiffs suing for their money, my mother was still the person whose name was on the dotted line, and they were casting a wide net to see whose pockets were deep enough to pay. "They want my bank records," Mom said, reading over my shoulder, her face draining of color. "They want to see my savings account. They are looking for assets," I explained. "Standard procedure. We will respond with the fraud documentation. We will clear this. But Mom, this is real. This is what Camille did." Mom sank into a chair. "Where is she?" "I called her yesterday. It went straight to voicemail." "That is the other thing?" I said, sitting down opposite her. "I did some digging last night. Derek has not been seen at his office in 3 days. His car is gone from their driveway." "Gone?" Mom gasped. "Did something happen to him?" "He is ghosting, Mom," I said flatly. "It is what cowards do. when the walls close in. He left Camille to face the music alone. I didn't tell her the rest of what I had found. I didn't tell her that while Derek was missing, a new LLC had popped up in the state registry just 48 hours ago. Prestige Global Logistics. It was a generic name, registered to a PSO box in a neighboring county. I had traced the registration fee payment. It came from a PayPal account linked to Derek's personal email. He wasn't missing. He was rebranding. I had spent the night following the digital breadcrumbs. It appeared Derek had been taking deposits for events scheduled 6 months out, weddings, corporate retreats, and using that cash to pay off the interest on his old debts. It was a classic Ponzi scheme structure, shuffling money from new victims to silence the old ones. But now, the cash flow had stopped, and he was setting up a new shell to try and catch one last windfall before the collapse. Later that afternoon, I drove to Stonebridge to hand off the subpoena to Elena, who was officially representing Mom now. On the way back, my phone rang. It was Camille. "Meet me," she said. No greeting, no insults, just a flat, hollow command. "I have nothing to say to you," I replied. "I am at the park near Sophie's school," she said. "I am sitting on the bench by the duck pond. Just come, please, for Mom." I hesitated. Strategically, I shouldn't go. Emotionally, I wanted to see the look in her eyes. I wanted to see if there was any remorse or just more maneuvering. 10 minutes, I said. I found her sitting on a park bench, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She looked thinner. The sleek, polished veneer she usually projected was cracked. Her designer bag sat on the bench next to her, scuffed at the corner. I didn't sit. I stood 5 feet away, arms crossed. "Where is Derek?" I asked. "He is away on business," Camille lied. Her voice lacked its usual conviction. "He is securing funding to pay everyone back. He is going to fix this. He is setting up a new shell company to steal more deposits," I said. "I know about Prestige Global." Camille flinched. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red. The makeup around them smudged. "You really do check everything, don't you?" she whispered. "It is my job," I said. "What do you want?" "Camille." "I want you to drop the fraud affidavit," she said. I almost laughed. "Are you insane?" "Listen to me," she said, leaning forward, desperation creeping into her tone. "If you pursue the identity theft claim, Derek goes to jail. I could go to jail. Do you really want that? Do you want Sophie's aunt and uncle in prison?" "I want my mother's retirement safe," I said. "You stole her name." "We borrowed it," Camille snapped. "And we can pay it back, but not if you freeze everything. Look, I can make a deal with you. A family agreement." "I am listening," I said, mostly out of morbid curiosity. "You drop the legal stuff. You tell the bank it was a misunderstanding and you authorize the signature retroactively. In exchange—" She paused, swallowing hard. "In exchange, I will apologize to Sophie. I will come over. I will bring her a gift. I will tell her I was just stressed and I didn't mean the servant comment." I stared at her. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees above us. A duck quacked loudly in the pond. "That is your offer?" I asked quietly. "You want to trade a felony charge for a fake apology?" "It is not fake," Camille insisted. "I will be nice. I will take her for ice cream. I will be the best aunt ever. Just make this go away." I looked at this woman, my sister, who had shared a room with me for 18 years. I realized I didn't know her at all, or maybe I did, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. She viewed people as currency. Sophie wasn't a child to her. She was a bargaining chip. An apology wasn't an act of contrition. It was a bribe. "Sophie is not a transaction," I said, my voice cold as ice, "and an apology is not ransom money. You do not get to use my daughter's feelings to buy your way out of prison." "You are so self-righteous," Camille sneered, standing up. "You think you are perfect, but you are going to destroy this family." "The family is already destroyed," I said. "I am just trying to save the survivors." "If you do not drop it," Camille threatened, "I will tell everyone Mom knew. I will tell the court she was a silent partner and she is only lying now because the business failed. I will drag her down with me. Do you think a jury will believe an old lady over her grieving daughter? Grieving. I raised an eyebrow. My marriage is falling apart because of you, she shouted. Derek left because of your investigation. Derek left because he is a con artist and the money ran out, I said. And if you lie about Mom in court, I will produce the digital forensics that prove she was at bingo while you were logging into her email from your living room. Do not test me. Camille, I have the receipts. Literally. I turned and walked away. I will fix this, she screamed after me. I have a plan. You will see. Everyone will see. I didn't look back, but her words lingered. I have a plan. The blow came 2 days later. I was at work when my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Elena. Subject urgent. Triton Holdings lawsuit. I opened the attachment. My heart hammered against my ribs. Triton Holdings, the company that owned the Pinnacle Estate mansion, had filed a lawsuit. They weren't just suing for the unpaid rental fee, they were suing for damages. Apparently, during the party, a guest had spilled red wine on a custom silk rug, and someone else, likely Derek in a drunken stupor, had backed a car into a stone pillar near the entrance. The total claim was for $52,000, and the lawsuit named 2 defendants, Camille Hartwell and Evelyn Bennett. Because the contract was in Mom's name, I left work early and drove straight to Mom's. She was sitting in the living room, holding the letter. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a week. $50,000, she whispered. I do not have $50,000. Aurora. My savings, that is all I have. We will fight it, I said, kneeling beside her. We have the affidavit. We will prove it wasn't you. But my name is there, she said, pointing to the bold letters, right next to hers. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a profound, shattering sadness. I trusted her, Mom said. I defended her. When you told me she was mean to Sophie, I told you to be quiet. I told you to apologize. It is okay, Mom, I said. You just wanted peace. No, Mom said firmly. It is not okay. She took a shaky breath and placed her hand on my cheek. I sacrificed you, she said, her voice cracking. For years, I let her treat you like you were less important because you were strong enough to take it. I thought because you were capable. You didn't need protecting, and because she was a mess, she needed everything. Tears welled in my eyes. It was the acknowledgement I had waited a lifetime to hear. I was wrong, Mom wept. I was wrong to always make you bear it. I was wrong to let her use you as a doormat, just so I didn't have to deal with her tantrums. Mom, shh, I soothed, hugging her. We are fixing it now. She is not going to get away with this, Mom said, pulling back, her jaw set with a newfound steel. I am not paying for that rug, and I am not paying for her party. We need to respond to this lawsuit, I said, but we need to do it publicly. We need to make sure the world knows that Signature is a fake. That evening, I went home to my apartment. Sophie was waiting for me. She had the small ceramic dish in her hands again. She had taken it out of the box. Mom, she asked, is Aunt Camille in trouble? Yes, honey, I said. Big trouble. Is it because of the money? Partly, I said. Mostly because she lied. Sophie looked at the dish. It was a beautiful teal color, with gold leaf around the rim. I still want her to have this, Sophie said quietly. I looked at my daughter, amazed by her capacity for grace. You do? Yeah, Sophie said, but not now. I want to give it to her when she learns how to say sorry, like, for real sorry, not the fake kind. That is a very grown-up decision, I said. If she changes, Sophie said, then she gets the present. If she doesn't, then I keep it. It reminds me that I am nice. I kissed the top of her head. You are the nicest person I know. Just then, my phone pinged with a notification from Facebook. It was an event invitation. I stared at the screen. Camille Hartwell invites you to the Fresh Start Charity Gala. I clicked on the details. Date this Saturday. Location: the Sapphire Room, a high-end hotel ballroom downtown. Description: a night to celebrate resilience, family, and giving back. All proceeds go to the Children's Dignity Foundation. I read it twice. Camille was throwing another party. She was doubling down. She was using the charity angle to try and whitewash her reputation. She was going to use this event to show her friends that the rumors of her financial ruin were false. She was going to stand on a stage, smile, and pretend her husband wasn't missing and her mother wasn't being sued for $50,000. And she was using a fake charity name. I knew for a fact the Children's Dignity Foundation did not exist in our state registry. She has a plan, I whispered, remembering Camille's parting words. This was her plan. One last, massive con to collect ticket sales, donations, and goodwill, likely to fund her escape or pay off the most aggressive sharks. I looked at the date. Saturday, 2 days away. I forwarded the invitation to Elena. Then I forwarded it to Sarah at the catering company. Then I forwarded it to the legal department at Triton Holdings. I typed a text to Elena. She is gathering everyone in one room. She thinks she is saving her image. I think she just built us a stage. Elena replied instantly. The process server is legally allowed to serve papers at a public event. Just saying. I smiled. It was a grim, tight smile. Camille wanted to be the center of attention. She wanted an audience. She wanted to prove to the world that she was untouchable. On Saturday, I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. I was going to go to that party, and I was going to bring the truth with me. The trap was set. All Camille had to do was walk onto the stage and pick up the microphone. The Sapphire Room was designed to impress. It was a cavernous ballroom in the city center, draped in velvet and lit by crystal chandeliers that cast a golden, forgiving light on everyone beneath them. Camille had pulled out all the stops for her Fresh Start Charity Gala. There was a red carpet. There were photographers she had likely hired herself. There was a banner hanging over the stage that read, Children's Dignity Foundation, a name so cynically perfect it made my stomach turn. I walked in at 7 o'clock sharp. I was wearing a simple black dress, and I held my mother's hand. Mom was trembling, but she kept her chin up. She was done hiding. You ready? I asked her. No, Mom admitted, but let us finish it. We moved through the crowd. I recognized many of the faces from the birthday party disaster. The woman in the red dress was there, sipping champagne. The man who bragged about his villa was there, checking his watch. They were here because they smelled drama, or because Camille owed them money, or perhaps just because the open bar was serving top-shelf liquor. Camille spotted us immediately. She was wearing a white gown this time, looking like a bride or a martyr. She rushed over, her face a mask of frantic hospitality. You came? She exclaimed, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. She leaned in to air-kiss my cheek, and her whisper was a hiss of pure venom. Smile, or I will scream. She pulled back, beaming. I am so glad my family is here to support this cause. It means the world to me. Then, she grabbed my elbow and steered me slightly away from Mom, toward a pillar. Here, she muttered, shoving a folded piece of paper into my hand. Sign it. I looked down. It was a document drafted on hotel stationery, mutual release and non-disclosure agreement. It essentially stated that I would retract all claims of fraud regarding the signature, and in exchange, Camille would assume stewardship of the debt at a future date. I am not signing this, I said, handing it back. If you do not sign it, I go down, Camille whispered, her eyes wide with panic. And if I go down, the press will know Mom was involved. Do you want her face on the news? Mom is not involved, I said calmly. She is a victim, and the only person going on the news is you. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. Please welcome your hostess, the founder of the Children's Dignity Foundation, Camille Hartwell. Camille shot me one last look of hatred, fixed her smile, and ascended the stage. The applause was polite but thin. The room felt tense. The rumors had been circulating for days. People were here to see if the tightrope walker would fall. "Thank you," Camille gushed into the microphone. "Oh, wow, what a turnout. You know, life is full of challenges. We all face storms, but tonight is about resilience. It is about family. It is about standing tall when people try to tear you down." She paused for effect, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. "There have been some misunderstandings lately," she continued, casting a meaningful glance in my direction. "Some hurtful rumors spread by people who, sadly, do not understand the complexity of high-level finance, but we forgive them. We move forward." I felt the eyes of the room shift to me. She was doing it. She was painting me as the bitter, ignorant sister. "And that is why I want to make a special donation tonight," Camille announced. "I am pledging $50,000 to the foundation in the name of objection." The word was not shouted, but it was spoken with such professional authority that it cut through the microphone's feedback. The double doors at the back of the room swung open. 3 men in dark suits walked in. Leading them was a woman carrying a briefcase. I recognized her. It was the lead counsel for Triton Holdings, the company that owned the mansion Camille had trashed. "Excuse me," Camille laughed nervously on stage. "We are in the middle of a speech." "Ms. Hartwell," the woman said, walking down the center aisle. The crowd parted instantly. "I am representing Triton Holdings and the collective creditors of Hartwell Future Ventures. We have a court order to freeze the assets being solicited at this event, as they are proceeds of an unregistered charity being run by an individual currently under investigation for fraud." The silence in the room was absolute. "You cannot be here," Camille shrieked, the microphone amplifying her panic. "Security, get them out." "We have a police escort," the lawyer said calmly, gesturing to the uniformed officers stepping through the doors behind her. She reached the stage and placed a stack of documents on the edge. "We also have a subpoena for Evelyn Bennett regarding the unauthorized use of her identity." Camille looked at the crowd. "This is a setup. My sister put them up to this. It is a lie." The lawyer turned to the room. She held up a document. "We have banking records obtained this morning," she announced, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "They show that the deposit for this ballroom was paid from an account named Prestige Global Logistics, funded yesterday by transfers from 3 unsuspecting couples who thought they were booking wedding venues. This event is being paid for with stolen money." The gasp that went through the room sucked all the oxygen out of the air. The VIPs, the friends in the designer dresses and the linen suits, did not wait for an explanation. They moved. It was a stampede of self-preservation. Glasses were set down on tables. Purses were grabbed. People who had been toasting Camille 5 minutes ago were now rushing for the exits, terrified of being associated with a Ponzi scheme. Camille stood on the stage, alone. The white dress no longer looked like a bridal gown. It looked like a surrender flag. She looked at Derek, who was standing near the bar. Derek turned his back on her and started walking toward the kitchen exit. "Derek," Camille screamed, "do not you dare walk away." He didn't stop. He disappeared through the swinging doors, leaving her to face the wreckage. Camille looked at me. I was standing next to Mom. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't gloating. I just walked forward until I was standing at the foot of the stage. "You did this," Camille sobbed, the microphone still clutched in her hand. "You ruined everything." I looked up at her. The camera of the videographer she had hired was still rolling, capturing every second of her downfall. "I did not ruin anything. Camille," I said. My voice was steady. "I just turned on the lights. I was trying to build a future," she wailed. "I was trying to show Sophie what is possible." "Sophie," I repeated. I turned and signaled to the back of the room. Sophie was standing there with Elena, my lawyer friend. I had not wanted her in the main crowd, but she needed to see this conclusion. I looked back at Camille. "You told my daughter she could help the servants clean up," I said, and my voice carried through the silent, empty ballroom. "You wanted to teach her a lesson about her place. Well, look around you. Camille, the friends are gone. The husband ran away. The money is stolen." I took a breath. You called my daughter a servant, I said, but the only person here who is living a lie, serving a fake image, and forcing her own mother to sign away her life is you. Camille dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening thud. She collapsed. She sank to her knees in her white dress, covering her face with her hands, and wept. It wasn't the fake, pretty crying she used to manipulate Mom. This was the ugly, guttural sound of someone whose world has completely disintegrated. Mom walked up beside me. She looked at her daughter on the stage. "Camille," Mom said softly. Camille looked up, mascara running down her face. "Mom, help me, please." "I cannot help you with the law," Mom said, her voice shaking but firm. I signed the affidavit. "Camille, the lawyer proved the signature was not mine. I am not liable for your debts. You really did it," Camille whispered. "I had to," Mom said. "You left me no choice. The police officers moved in then. They didn't handcuff her, but they escorted her off the stage. They had questions about the charity funds as they led her past us." Camille stopped. She looked at Sophie, who had walked up to stand beside me. For the first time in her life, Camille didn't look through Sophie. She didn't look at her shoes or her dress. She looked into her eyes. "Sophie?" Camille choked out. Sophie stood tall. She held the small ceramic dish in her hands. She didn't offer it. She just held it. "I am sorry," Camille said. Her voice was broken. "I am sorry I was mean. I am sorry I made you feel small." Sophie looked at her aunt. She looked at the police officers. She looked at the ruined party. "I do not hate you, Aunt Camille," Sophie said. Her voice was clear and kind, the only pure thing in the room. "But I need you to respect me, and respect Mom." Camille nodded. Fresh tears spilled over. "I know." Then the officers led her away. 6 months later, the fall was hard, as it had to be. Derek was caught 3 states away trying to open another shell company. He was facing multiple counts of wire fraud. Divorce proceedings were underway, managed by a public defender because neither of them had any money left for private counsel. Camille avoided jail time by cutting a plea deal. She admitted to the identity theft and the fraudulent charity, agreeing to a strict restitution plan. She was sentenced to 5 years of probation and community service. Her image was gone. The mansion, the lake house fantasy, the VIP friends all evaporated like mist. I parked my car in front of a small, nondescript coffee shop on the edge of town. It was raining, a gray November afternoon. I walked inside. The bell chimed. Camille was behind the counter. She was wearing a green apron and a visor. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup. She looked tired, but she looked real. She saw me and froze. Then, she nodded. "Hi, Aurora," she said. "Hi," I said. "Large black coffee, please." She rang it up. "That will be $3. I handed her the cash. She made the coffee. Her hands were steady. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was just working. She was cleaning up her own mess. One $3 coffee at a time. "How is Mom?" Camille asked, as she handed me the cup. "She is good," I said. "She joined a gardening club. She's learning to set boundaries." "And Sophie?" "Sophie is great," I said. "She got an A in math." Camille looked down at the counter. Tell her I am working on it." "She knows," I said. I turned to leave, but then I stopped. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small box. I placed it on the counter. "Sophie wanted you to have this," I said. Camille opened the box. Inside was the teal ceramic dish, the one she had tossed aside at the party. Camille stared at it. Her fingers traced the rim. "She said you might need something to put your keys in," I said. "Something real." Camille looked up at me, and her eyes filled with tears, but they were grateful tears. "Thank you," she whispered. I walked out into the rain. That evening, Mom, Sophie, and I celebrated my birthday at my apartment. We didn't have a caterer. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor in the living room. We laughed until our sides hurt. We told stories. Mom looked younger than she had in years. the weight of the secret debt lifted from her shoulders. Sophie handed me a gift. It was a card she had drawn herself. It showed the three of us, me, Mom, and Sophie holding hands under a giant sun. "It is perfect," I said, hugging her. I looked around my small living room. It wasn't a mansion. I didn't have servants. I didn't have a legacy to leave behind in the social pages. But I had this. I had the truth. I had a family that was finally built on solid ground. I thought about the ceramic dish sitting on the counter of that coffee shop. Camille was learning the lesson that Sophie had known all along. Value isn't found in the things that sparkle. It isn't found in the applause of strangers or the height of the pedestal you stand on. Value is in the quiet dignity of being kind, the strength of being honest, and the way you treat the people who can do absolutely nothing for you. My sister had tried to teach my daughter to be a servant. Instead, my daughter had taught us all how to be queens, and that was a lesson worth more than all the gold in the world. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and let us know what you thought of Aurora's justice. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people.